It was 2:13 in the morning when I realized I hadn't passed a single car in over an hour. Not one. No trucks, no headlights, nothing. Just me and my old sedan rolling down an endless ribbon of black asphalt they call Route 66. The air outside was so still it felt dead. No wind against the car. No rustle of leaves from the occasional cluster of trees that leaned toward the road like they were eavesdropping. Even the engine seemed quieter than usual, as if it knew we were somewhere we shouldn't be. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. My hands were cold, but my forehead was damp with sweat. I told myself it was just the fatigue I'd been driving for hours, and the only thing keeping me going was the weak coffee in my cuckolder. But in the back of my mind, there was this pressure, like the darkness on either side of the road was leaning in, pushing against the thin layer of glass between me and it. The speedometer read 60, but it felt like I wasn't moving at all. The road was too perfect. No cracks, no faded paint, no litter on the shoulder, just an unbroken stretch, lit only by my headlights, which seemed to fade into the blackness far too soon. I glanced at my phone. No signal, no surprise. Out here, you could drive 50 miles without seeing a gas station. But that was part of the reason I'd taken this route. Less traffic, fewer distractions. I thought it would be peaceful. It wasn't. The first strange thing happened when I reached mile marker 217. I only noticed it because I'd been counting them in my head to stay awake. Mile marker 215, then 216, then 217. But a moment later, another marker came into view. 217 again. I slowed the car, staring at the green reflective sign as I passed. The numbers were identical to the one I'd seen not even a minute ago. I told myself I'd misread the first one, but my stomach twisted in a way I couldn't ignore. A mile later, I saw 217 for a third time. My headlights caught something in the rearview mirror, a faint movement on the edge of the light. I thought maybe it was a deer or the shadow of a tree I hadn't noticed. But when I checked again, there was nothing there, just darkness. I pressed harder on the gas. That's when the horizon shifted. At first I thought I was imagining it. The road ahead seemed to bend, not in the way a road curves, but like the black sky itself was folding inward. For a moment I felt like I was driving toward the inside of a closing fist, and then, just as the claustrophobia reached a breaking point, I saw it, a glow, faint but steady, off to the right side of the road. I squinted, trying to make out the shape. Neon letters, buzzing softly, spelling out gas in peeling red paint. The sign looked ancient, like it had been there for decades, but I was certain it hadn't been on any map or in any travel guide. Out here, that meant one of two things. Either it was abandoned, or it wasn't supposed to exist at all. I pulled onto the gravel lot, my headlights sweeping over rusted gas pumps with glass globes on top, the kind I'd only ever seen in old photos. The building behind them was a squat brick structure with a single door and a wide front window, though the glass was so dusty I couldn't see inside. That's when I noticed the man. He was leaning against one of the pumps, arms crossed, wearing coveralls stained with oil. His hair was slicked back, and his skin looked pale under the flickering neon, but it was his eyes that made my throat tighten. He wasn't looking at my car, he was looking directly at me and smiling. His smile wasn't the kind you see in small-town diners, the kind that says, "Howdy, stranger." It was thin, fixed, and just slightly too wide. I didn't open the door right away. Something about him pinned me to my seat. It wasn't fear, exactly. More like the instinct you get when you see a snake in tall grass. You don't move until you know which way it's going to strike. He raised his right hand slowly, like he was waving me over. No urgency, just expectation. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel, and for a brief second I thought about reversing. About getting back onto Route 66 and pretending I never saw this place. But then I remembered the mile markers, the repeating 217, and realized I might not even find the road again the same way I came. The man didn't break eye contact as I stepped out of the car. The gravel crunched under my shoes. The sound, far too loud in the still night. My breath came out in thin clouds, even though it wasn't cold. "You're late," he said. His voice was calm, almost conversational, but it scraped against my ears like sandpaper. "Late for what?" I asked. My own voice sounded smaller than I expected. He tilted his head slightly, the smile never fading. "You'll see." There was a faint humming, and at first I thought it was the neon sign above us. But it was deeper than that. Low vibration under my feet, as though the ground itself was breathing. I glanced toward the building, hoping for some kind of normalcy, but the dusty window didn't show anything. No shelves, no lights inside, just darkness, thick and unmoving. The man's eyes flicked toward the door. Inside, before the others. Get here, others. I should have left right then. Every nerve in my body screamed for me to get back in the car, to drive until the gas ran out, to keep going even if the road circled back on itself. But instead, my legs moved on their own, carrying me toward the door. The handle was cold, not just cool from the night air, but cold, like metal that had been sitting in a freezer. When I pulled it open, a wave of air rolled over me, damp, and heavy. Inside, the darkness swallowed me whole. No hum from a refrigerator, no ticking of a clock. The floor beneath me felt uneven, as though I'd stepped onto warped wood, but when I looked down, I couldn't see my own feet. The man followed me in, closing the door behind us with a sound that echoed far too long for such a small space. Then there was a click, and a single bulb overhead flickered to life. We weren't in a gas station anymore. The walls were old brick, blackened with age, and stretched upward far higher than they had any right to. The air smelled faintly of oil and something sweeter, rotting. There was no counter, no shelves, just a long hallway stretching into shadow. "This way," the man said. His footsteps were the only sound as he moved ahead of me, but I could feel, and I swear this is true, something else walking in sync with me, just behind my left shoulder. Every time I tried to glance back, there was nothing there, but when I faced forward again, I could hear the faintest echo of footsteps that weren't mine. The hallway narrowed until the walls almost brushed my arms. Ahead, a faint light flickered, not white, but orange, like candlelight. When we reached the source, I froze. It was another door, heavy and wooden, with black iron hinges. The man rested his palm against it, and without looking back at me, he said, "Once you go through, you can't go back." I opened my mouth to ask what was behind it, but before I could speak, I heard them, the others. It started as a shuffle, distant but growing. Dozens of feet on stone. The sound was wrong, too fast, too uneven, like they weren't moving in step with their bodies. And underneath it all, that low vibration from the ground was stronger, pulsing in time with the steps. The man looked at me finally, his smile gone. "Choose." I looked at the door. I looked back at the darkness behind us, and I realized something. That made my skin crawl. The footsteps weren't coming from behind us, they were coming from above. I don't know why, but I grabbed the door handle before my brain had even decided. The iron was warm, unnaturally warm, as if someone had just been gripping it from the other side. The man didn't stop me. He just stepped aside, watching me with that unreadable expression. I pushed, and the heavy wood creaked open on its hinges. The air that poured out was thick and damp, smelling of wet stone and something faintly metallic, like old pennies and rainwater. I stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was that the ceiling vanished into darkness. No walls in sight, just massive stone pillars disappearing upward into shadow. The floor was uneven, paved with large ancient stones, each one etched with deep grooves that looked almost like claw marks. The man followed, closing the door behind us. The sound echoed in this strange space like we'd shut ourselves inside a cathedral. "Where are we?" I whispered. "Somewhere you shouldn't be," he said. That's when I heard it again, the footsteps. They were still above us, but now, closer, heavier. Each one landed with a faint vibration that traveled down the stone columns and into the floor beneath my shoes. I looked up, squinting into the dark, and for a moment I thought I saw movement, something massive shifting between the pillars. Not human, too big. The man tilted his head, listening. "We're early, that's good." "Early for what?" My voice cracked. He didn't answer. Instead, he started walking toward one of the pillars. His pace was calm, deliberate, like he was following a path only he could see. As I trailed behind, I noticed strange carvings along the pillar's base, spirals, jagged lines, and what looked disturbingly like rows of teeth. They weren't decorative, they were warnings. "Look," he said, pointing. I followed his gaze downward. At the base of the pillar, lying in the grooves between the stones, was a shoe. It was old, leather, cracked and stiff, but there was no dust on it. Someone had been here recently. My stomach tightened, whereas the rest of the sound above us stopped. The silence was worse than the footsteps. It was heavy, pressing against my eardrums like deep water. I couldn't even hear my own breathing. Then, something exhaled. Not a breeze, not a draft, an exhale, long, slow, and wet. It drifted down from the darkness above, carrying a smell so foul it made my eyes water. The man glanced upward. "It knows we're here." A deep, resonant sound rumbled through the pillars. Not quite a growl, not quite a voice, but something in between. I took a step back. "We should leave." He shook his head. "Too late for that. It's already seen you." Somewhere high above, stone cracked. Tiny bits of dust rained down, dotting my jacket, and then I saw it. A pale shape emerged from the darkness. A hand, massive and skeletal, each finger ending in a claw as long as my forearm. The skin, if you could call it that, was thin, and stretched tight, almost translucent. With black veins pulsing beneath the surface, it gripped the pillar, and with a sickening, deliberate movement, began to lower itself toward us. I didn't think. I ran. The man didn't shout for me to stop. In fact, I thought I heard him laughing, low and amused, as my footsteps pounded against the ancient stone. The sound behind me grew louder, not the slow steps from before, but a scramble. Claws. On stone. Chasing. Somewhere in the distance, I saw light, faint, but enough to pull me forward. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. I didn't care. When I finally burst into the glow, I found myself at the edge of a massive chasm. The floor simply ended, dropping into darkness so deep it felt endless. The light was coming from across the gap, a single lantern swinging gently, hanging from what looked like another stone walkway far beyond my reach. The man's voice came from behind me, calm as ever. "There's only one way across." I turned to face him and froze. He wasn't alone anymore. There were three of him now. The three men stood there, side by side, each wearing the same dark coat, the same flat expression, the same eyes that didn't blink enough. For a moment I thought my vision had split, like some strange optical illusion, but then one of them tilted his head to the left, while the other two remained perfectly still. That's when I knew. They were separate. "You're not real," I said, my voice shaking. The one in the middle smiled. "Barely. Neither is this place." Behind them the pale hand was still gripping the pillar, fingers flexing like it was tasting the air. The creature hadn't fully revealed itself yet, but I could feel the weight of its gaze pressing on my back, even though it had no visible eyes. One of the men stepped forward. His boots made no sound on the stone. "Choose," he said. "Choose. Which of us you trust?" A sound like bones grinding together echoed from above, followed by the slow, deliberate descent of that skeletal hand. The claws scraped the stone, sending sparks into the darkness. I glanced over the edge of the chasm. No bottom, not even an echo when I dropped a pebble. Just pure black. "What happens if I choose wrong?" I asked. The one on the left finally spoke, voice lower, more gravelly. "You fall." The creature's exhale came again, this time so close I could feel it against my neck. The air was damp, warm, and smelled faintly of rot and something chemical. I turned back to the men. "Hup, am I supposed to know which one? Time is gone." The middle one interrupted. "It's already looking at you." The sound of claws on stone grew faster, more desperate. I had seconds. My pulse thundered in my ears. I picked one, the man on the right. The other two vanished instantly, dissolving into shadow that bled upward into the darkness above. The man I'd chosen gave a slow nod. "Run." We turned and sprinted along the edge of the chasm. The claws slammed down behind us, shattering stone and sending chunks tumbling into the void. The walkway began to narrow until it was no wider than my shoulders. The lantern ahead swayed wildly now, as if it knew we were coming. Just before the path ended, the man stopped. He pointed to a jagged stone archway jutting out from the wall. It looked impossibly thin, like it couldn't hold a person's weight. "That's the only way forward," he said. I hesitated. "It'll collapse." "Everything does," he replied. The creature was almost upon us. I didn't think I just ran for the archway. The stone groaned under my weight, but it held. On the other side was a narrow tunnel, dripping with condensation, the air colder and sharper than before. I could still hear the claws behind me, scraping against the stone walkway. But when I glanced back, the man was gone. Only the pale hand remained, gripping the archway, blocking the tunnel entrance. It flexed once, then released and as it pulled away, I realized something that made my skin crawl. There was no creature attached to the hand. The tunnel swallowed me whole. Its walls were slick and close, and the air smelled like wet earth and rusted metal. Each drop of water hitting the stone floor echoed too loudly, like the sound was trying to warn me of something ahead. My breathing bounced off the walls faster than I wanted it to be, betraying my panic that I kept thinking about that hand, detached, independent, like it had a will of its own. Every few steps, I glanced behind me, half expecting to see those long pale fingers, dragging along the tunnel floor, curling and uncurling like they were tasting the space. The deeper I went, the colder it got. Not the kind of cold you feel on your skin that sank straight into your bones, slowing your thoughts, making each step feel heavier. Somewhere up ahead, I heard it, a faint hum, low and steady, almost mechanical. I slowed my pace, straining to listen. It wasn't just a sound, it was a vibration, faintly trembling through the walls. When I rounded the bend, I saw it. A door, not a normal door. It looked like it belonged in an old submarine. Thick, round, with a wheel in the center, and rivets along the edges. The metal was corroded, the paint long peeled away. Above it, faintly glowing in the dark, was a single word, mile marker 0. I didn't understand. Route 66's mile marker 0 was supposed to be in Chicago, thousands of miles away. I pressed my ear to the door. The hum was louder now, accompanied by faint, rhythmic tapping, like someone drumming their fingers against metal from the other side. Then, a voice. "You're late." I stumbled back so fast I almost slipped on the wet stone. The voice came again, closer this time. "We've been waiting." I didn't want to ask who. I didn't want to know. But I couldn't move. My hands, almost against my will, gripped the wheel in the center of the door. It was stiff at first, but as soon as I applied real pressure, it turned far too easily, like something on the other side wanted me to open it. The seal broke with a hiss of stale, metallic air. I gagged. It smelled like old coins and dried blood. Inside was a vast chamber. The walls curved away into shadow, lit only by faint strips of dim red lights along the floor. In the middle stood a long table, and around it, the three men. They were seated side by side, motionless. The man I'd chosen earlier was in the middle now. "You made it," he said. Not everyone does. I tried to speak, but the cold in my chest made words hard to form. What is this place? The end, he said simply. For you, maybe the beginning. Something moved under the table. I heard the sound of nails, no claws, dragging against wood. Slowly, from beneath, that pale hand emerged again. But now, there were two. One settled on the table in front of me, fingers curling toward my wrist like it wanted to pull me down. The other rested in front of the man in the middle, and when it moved, he moved with it. My stomach turned. The men, they weren't separate from the hands. They were just another part of the same thing, and it wasn't human. I took a step back, but the sound of the wheel-lock door slamming shut behind me froze me in place. The three men didn't flinch. They sat there, their faces impossibly still, eyes fixed on me. The two pale hands, no, things rested in front of us like patient predators. You came all this way. The man in the middle said, his voice soft but cutting through the cold air. Don't you want to know why? I shook my head instinctively. I didn't want to know. I wanted out, but my legs weren't listening. My body moved toward the table like I'd been rehearsing it my whole life. The red lights on the floor flickered, and I realized something awful. The chamber wasn't empty. In the shadows behind the men, shapes swayed, tall, thin, and wrong. Their outlines kept shifting, as if they were struggling to hold a form my mind could understand. The man on the left leaned forward, his eyes glassy but sharp. Route 66 isn't a road, he whispered. It's a tether. My mouth went dry. A tether to what? They smiled at the same time, the kind of smile that has no warmth in it, just teeth, to us. The pale hands began to move again, sliding closer. The one in front of me brushed the back of my own hand, and I swear the air around it burned cold. I yanked away, but not before feeling something push into my skin. Not sharp, but deep, like a thread sewing itself through my bones. Images hit me all at once. A stretch of Route 66 under a blood-red sky, cars frozen in place, their drivers staring blankly ahead, black shapes crawling along the asphalt, disappearing into people's shadows. I stumbled back, gasping, but the man in the middle was already standing. You've seen it now, he said, walking toward me. His shadow stretched far too long behind him, stretching across the walls, over the table, even under the other men. That means you can't leave. The tapping sound returned, louder, surrounding me. It wasn't coming from the hands anymore. It was coming from the walls. The curved metal began to bulge inward in places, as if something huge was pressing against it from the outside, trying to get in. The man on the right spoke for the first time, his voice rasping like old paper tearing. You'll take the road back, you'll carry it with you, and when you find the next one, we'll know. I shook my head violently. No, I'm not part of this. I'm not. The pale hands shot forward. One gripped my wrist, the other clamped over my mouth. The cold went straight through me, and before I could fight, the red lights blinked out, leaving me in total darkness. Somewhere in the black, the hum returned. Only now, I knew what it was. Not a machine, but a chorus of low voices, chanting in a language I didn't understand. And above it all, one voice, clear and close to my ear dry. When the lights came back, I was no longer in the chamber. I was standing in the middle of Route 66. Except, it wasn't Route 66 the way I remembered it. The air was heavy, the kind of thick that clings to your skin and makes breathing feel like work. The asphalt under my boots pulsed faintly, almost like a heartbeat. The road stretched straight ahead into a black horizon, lined on both sides by telephone poles that seemed taller than any real structure should be. Their wires sagged low, humming, with the sound I felt in my teeth. My truck was there, parked crooked on the shoulder, headlights on but throwing almost no light into the murk. I tried to run toward it, but the distance didn't change. Every step I took seemed to pull the truck further away, until I stopped, panting, and looked over my shoulder. That's when I saw it. A second me. Same jacket, same boots, same everything, standing exactly where I'd been a moment ago. Only, his eyes were empty, a glassy white, and his mouth hung open just enough for a long, low hiss to escape. The hiss got louder, and then he stepped toward me. I backed away instinctively, only to realize there were more of them in the distance. Dozens, maybe hundreds, each standing at different points along the road, all staring straight at me. The hum from the telephone wires grew louder until it became a sharp crack, and the world flickered like an old film reel losing frames. For an instant, the sky turned red and the road was gone, replaced by a swirling, black surface that looked more like water than asphalt. Something massive moved beneath it, dragging shadows with it, and just as suddenly, the normal road returned. But the others, they were closer now. The nearest one, my copy, tilted its head in a way no human neck should bend. Drive, it said, the same word I'd heard whispered in the dark chamber. I ran for the truck. This time, the distance collapsed in seconds. I threw myself into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and twisted the key. The engine roared to life, but the sound was wrong, deep, wet, almost gurgling, like the truck was breathing. When I looked in the rearview mirror, I expected to see the road behind me. Instead, I saw the inside of the chamber. The three men The pale hands, the swaying shapes in the shadows. One of them lifted a finger to their lips. I hit the gas. The truck lurched forward, the road blurring under me. The telephone poles seemed to bend inward as I sped past, their wires snapping like old rope. For a while, I thought I was outrunning whatever had taken hold of me. But then I noticed the mile markers. They weren't counting up or down. They were repeating the same number, over and over, and every time I passed it, I swore I could see a figure standing just beyond the sign waiting. The mile marker read 113. It had read 113 the last 7 times I passed it. Each time, the figure beside it was different. The first was a woman in a tattered 1950s dress, hair stiff with hairspray, eyes wide like she'd just seen the impossible. The next was a kid, couldn't have been older than 10, with a Route 66 diner uniform, 2 sizes too big. Ketchup stains frozen in the fabric. The third looked like a state trooper, except his skin had the waxy sheen of a mannequin. By the 7th pass, my hands were trembling so badly I had to grip the wheel to keep from veering off the road. The figure now was an old man with no face at all, just smooth, pale skin stretched tight where eyes and mouth should be. The hum from the telephone wires had stopped. In its place, I could hear them. Whispers. Not one voice, but many, dozens, maybe hundreds, speaking all at once, overlapping until the words blurred together. But every so often, one voice would cut through, sharp and clear. Turn around. You're going the wrong way. Stop the truck. I pressed the accelerator harder. 90, 95, 100. The road didn't change. No curves, no towns, no gas stations. Just the endless stretch of cracked blacktop under the same dead sky. Then, the road breathed. I felt it in my spine. First a deep, slow inhale that pulled the truck forward without me touching the gas. The lines on the pavement rippled, as if painted on something soft. The steering wheel twitched in my hands. That's when the asphalt ahead split open. It didn't crack, it peeled, like wet paper, revealing a black void underneath. From that darkness, long, thin arms reached up. They weren't human. They weren't anything I recognized. Jointless, slick, and glistening in the half-light. One arm slapped against the pavement just inches from my front tire. Another clawed at the air, its movement perfectly in sync with the whispers. I swerved hard, tires screeching, and for a moment the illusion of the road shattered. I wasn't on Route 66 anymore. I was suspended above nothing, just a vast, infinite drop into blackness, with fragments of asphalt floating like islands in the void. My truck skidded from one to the next, each fragment trembling under the weight. Somewhere behind me, something was following. Not running, not flying, just moving, faster than I could drive, faster than I could think. I could feel it closing the distance, every breath on my neck colder than the last. And then I saw the headlights, not mine. Another vehicle, up ahead. A 1970s muscle car, paint flaking, one headlight out. It was just idling in the middle of the fragment ahead, driver's door hanging open like someone had gotten out in a hurry. I didn't think. I jumped from my truck before it could stop moving, landing hard on the floating asphalt, pain shooting through my knees. The muscle car's interior smelled like stale cigarettes and rain-soaked leather. Keys were still in the ignition. I slid in and turned them. The engine rumbled awake. For a brief moment I thought maybe I'd found a way out. Then I looked in the rearview mirror. The reflection wasn't me. It was the old man with no face, and this time, the skin where his mouth should be began to tear. The tearing sound was like fabric ripping underwater, slow, wet, deliberate. The skin where the old man's mouth should be split down the middle, peeling back to reveal teeth that didn't belong in any human jaw. Too many of them, too sharp, curving backward into the throat. Behind them, a darkness that seemed to pull at my eyes, like it wanted me to fall into it. The muscle car's engine growled, but the sound was swallowed by the thing in the mirror. The teeth moved, and I swear I felt the words in my bones, not in my ears. You're already inside. I slammed the gearshift into drive and floored the gas. The tires squealed, kicking up chunks of crumbling asphalt as the muscle car leaped forward across the floating fragments of road. The gaps between them were widening, and every time I jumped one, I could feel the void beneath. Reaching up, the whispers were louder now, so loud I could make out individual voices. Some sounded angry, some pleading. One was a child's voice, saying over and over, "Don't go deeper, please don't go deeper." But I knew I didn't have a choice. Whatever this place was, forward was the only direction left. I glanced at the mirror again. Mistake. The old man's head now filled the glass, as if his body was pressed right up against the back of my skull. His skin was cracking, thin veins of black spreading outward like frost on glass. When the first vein touched the edge of the mirror, the crack spread into the car's windshield. Tiny white fractures spiderwebbed across the glass, and with them came a change in the air, a thick metallic temps that coated my tongue. Blood. The cracks widened, and something began seeping through. Not liquid, smoke, dense and black. It poured into the car, curling around my arms, my neck, my mouth. The smoke was warm, and it pulsed like it had a heartbeat. Every instinct screamed at me to stop the car. to get out, but the fragments of road behind me were collapsing into the void. I could see it, each one crumbling like burnt paper and vanishing into nothingness. Then I saw it ahead, a single intact stretch of Route 66, stretching straight into a pitch-black tunnel carved into the side of a cliff that shouldn't exist. The moment the tires hit solid pavement again, the smoke in the car surged forward, wrapping around my head and forcing my eyes toward the mirror one last time. The old man's mouth was now fully open, stretching far beyond where a human jaw could go, until it was nothing but a tunnel of teeth, and inside that tunnel was me, not the me driving the car, but another me, pale, still eyes wide in terror, trapped in the reflection that the thing in the mirror smiled, and the road pulled me into the tunnel. The tunnel wasn't just dark, it was absolute. No headlights, no dashboard glow, no reflection in the mirror, just the sound of the engine echoing back at me in a way that felt wrong, like it wasn't bouncing off walls, but off something moving. Then, one by one, my senses began to fail. First, the hum of the tires on asphalt faded until it was just the engine. Then the engine sound thinned, too, as though someone was turning the volume down inside my skull. I should have been terrified, but something about the air in here made my thoughts sluggish, heavy. My hands stayed on the wheel, even though I wasn't sure I was steering anymore. It was the smell that hit me next. Sweet at first, like rotting fruit left in the sun, then sour, then metallic. The same smell I'd tasted before the tunnel. Blood. The silence broke when something scraped along the side of the car. A long, slow sasashik like claws dragging over metal. Then another sound, a soft tap 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 on the passenger window. I turned my head. A pale face was pressed against the glass, upside down, grinning wide enough to tear skin. The eyes were open too far, black where they should have been white. When it saw me looking, the grin twitched wider and it mouthed something. I didn't hear it. I didn't have to. I could feel the words slide into my mind. Stop. I shook my head and looked forward again. Big mistake. The road had vanished. In its place was an ocean, flat, black, endless. The car floated on it. No tires, no sound, just stillness. I checked the mirror. The old man was back, but now his skin was smooth and featureless, his eyes gone. In their place was nothing but a void that seemed to swallow my gaze. The tapping on the window grew louder, faster, a frenzy now. I knew that if I looked again, I'd see more than one face. I'd see all the faces of the ones who never made it out of here, and I'd join them. The air grew thick, pressing against my chest. My breathing slowed. It was getting harder to keep my eyes open. Then the old man's voice came again, from nowhere and everywhere at once. You've always been on this road. The black ocean rippled, and shapes rose from beneath hands, arms, torsos, all pale and dripping. They reached for the car, pulling it down, their mouths opening in silent screams. The last thing I saw before the water closed over the windshield was me, reflected perfectly on its surface. Not moving, not breathing, just staring. And then, nothing. No road, no car, no me. Just the knowledge that I was still here, somewhere, waiting for the next traveler who thought they could drive Route 66 after midnight without paying attention to the signs. Because the truth is, once you've heard the whispers, you're already part of it. No matter how far you drive, the road always knows where to find you. No matter how fast you run, it's already waiting ahead. And no matter how much you tell yourself it's just a story, you'll remember it tonight when you see a stretch of road with no lights, and you hear a voice in the back seat ask if you're going the right way. In the end, there's only one certainty. The world you see may not be all that exists. Comment what you think, and if you dare, come back tomorrow. There's always another story waiting for you. But remember, some stories never end.